Hey there, Together Learners. Eric back again. And of course, at Together Learning, we love to learn together. But what about computers? How do machines learn? That is the topic of this video today. And to talk about this machine learning concept, we're going to combine a couple of strange things. We're going to talk about Star Trek, an old TV show. We're going to talk about a person in history. His name is Alan Turing. And we're going to talk about recent news of a Google engineer who thinks his chatbot is sentient. That's a key word, sentient. So, machine learning, Google engineers, people in history, and TV shows all together to give us a picture of what it is to be a machine and to learn things. Coming right up. All right, so machine learning. It's the process of training algorithms, right? When we program things, we're learning in our online courses. Perhaps you're taking digital literacy or some other programming courses at Together Learning. And we learn concepts of how computers work, translating what humans talk into what computers talk with. Usually that's some sort of human language to binary code. But we need to be able to train these systems to recognize words, pictures, images, and basically patterns all throughout different things on the internet. A lot of times that means language. Sometimes it means being able to recognize things in pictures. And so we are getting really good at training algorithms to feed lots of data into a machine so it can learn what things are. Show it lots of pictures of an apple so it knows what an apple is, basically. So that is at the heart of machine learning. But to get at this concept, to start to understand it a little bit better, we're going to start to employ a simple test, and it's called the Turing test. And that name just came up at the top of this video because Alan Turing is the person in history for which this test is named after. One of the reasons that we're going to be doing that is because in 2022, this Google engineer was working on this chatbot. And this chatbot is like a machine that's learning words, learning how to communicate. We give it lots of data, we give it lots of conversations, and it learns how to talk to people. And this engineer thought his chatbot was sentient, meaning that he thought his chatbot was alive. And so to know whether it is alive or not, one of the tools that we can use, and we're going to get into whether this is a good tool or not, is the Turing test, right? So this Google engineer basically was fooled, maybe not, but he thinks that his chatbot is sentient, and this means it definitely passed the Turing test. So what does that mean? What is the Turing test? Well, what they were working on is this language model for dialogue applications. It's like an algorithm, a machine learning algorithm to help train chatbots. It's the ability to put a bunch of conversations into a data set and feed that data set into an algorithm, and it learns how to do conversations by reading conversations between people. And this is a main way that machine learning is done. You give it a bunch of things and the machine looks at lots and lots and lots of data. The bigger data set, the better. And it takes information and finds a bunch of patterns in that stuff that could be about conversations and how to respond to people and how to react and give responses in a conversation from tons of things, from transcripts of people talking to just things out on the internet are pulled in. So that's what this was all about, what this Google engineer was working on. But how do we define sentience? And this is where the Star Trek comes in this conversation, right? Because Star Trek, if you know anything about me, is a great tool to kind of learn about the future of a lot of these technologies and how they integrate into society. And one of the main characters in Star Trek is actually a robot. And they spend a whole lot of time in Star Trek trying to ask the question, how do we know that this robot is sentient? How do we know he's a person? And I'm going to show you a little clip from the episode that they ask this question, and they kind of come up on it with an answer.
Data is not sentient, no.
Come on, would you enlighten us? What is required for sentience?
Intelligence.
Let me play that again, just so you can maybe you can hear that just a little bit better, shall we?
Self-awareness, consciousness. Data is not sentient, no.
Come on, would you enlighten us? What is required for sentience?
Intelligence, self-awareness, consciousness.
Right? So in this episode, he's talking about the robot, which is this guy here, his Data, and they're trying to figure out if he is just like a human, if he's alive. And they asked him the question, what does it mean to be sentient, which means to have feelings and be aware? And he comes up with three kind of answers for that. And for sentience, according to this person in this show, is intelligence, to have self-awareness, and to have consciousness. And these are three very difficult things to test for. We can test for intelligence. That's kind of easy one, right? We can see somebody's smart enough or knows things. To be self-aware, that's a little bit easier too. That's when you can ask a person, like, do you know who you are, what you are, where you are in the universe, and what you represent, what do you think, what's going on in your mind, lots of things. To be aware of your surroundings and who you are is one thing. Consciousness is another kind of thing too that is really hard to kind of come down on. Is this person alive and feeling things in the world? And these are things, also things that are a little bit more difficult to test. Now, if you told these things to a computer scientist, these maybe not be the things that they would actually try to use to test to see if a chatbot were sentient. But the Turing test from a long time ago, 1950s on, you can actually watch a movie based on that person that invented this, Alan Turing. And he was based in a movie called The Imitation Game. Great movie that talks about the birth of artificial intelligence and a lot of these programs, phenomenal programs that happened during World War II in machine learning, in being able to use computers to figure out and find patterns. Right? So that was the birth of AI. So he made the Turing test. Alan Turing made the Turing test. And his version of being able to know if a artificial intelligence had sentience or not was this test. And this test is basically you sit down at a computer and you start talking to somebody on the other end. Like texting. You guys probably do this all day long, right? You text somebody, they say, hey, what's up? You get an answer back. Hey, how you doing? What are we doing today? I'm not sure. What do you feel like? Kind of situation. So this person sits down at a computer and starts chatting, but they don't know who's on the other end. It could be either another person or it could be an AI that is responding from either machine learning, from a set trained from other conversations, or maybe even from a set of canned programmed responses. And so if you're this person and you start chatting and you can't tell if you're talking to an AI or a person, or you think you're talking to a person, but it's really the AI, that to the Alan Turing test is a sign of sentience. Basically saying if you can't tell if it's AI, then it's sentient, it's a real person. This doesn't really prove much. It just proves that it fooled a human into thinking that there's a person on the other end when really there might not be. So in thinking about this in the long run, this is really just an exercise in being able to mimic humans. And this is what happened to the Google engineer who thought his program was sentient. He thought he was fooled. And even though he knew it was an AI, he was convinced that he was talking to a person because of the responses that that chatbot was giving him. And he thought it had all of these things. It thought it was sentient. It was intelligent. He was asking it really difficult questions. He was asking it about, do you know you're an AI? And it was answering back these things. And what do you think about the universe and your role in it? And it was giving all of these great, deep answers. And so he concluded that he thought his chatbot was sentient. It passed the Turing test for him. But again, the Turing test doesn't necessarily mean that that thing is artificial intelligence or sentient, right? These terms are very specific about this. So how do we know if the computer or the construct or that chatbot is really sentient, right? In this situation, it's only text that this chatbot's able to work with. If you tried to talk to it, try to show it a picture, you wouldn't be able to begin to do that, right? So it's very specific about that. It's words, it's language written in text form, right? One thing that I'd like to bring up is the importance of training these bots, these chatbots, and machine learning is only as good as the data you give it. There's a very popular phrase in computer science. It's called garbage in, garbage out. If you put a bunch of bad data into a machine learning, and it's going to learn from that bad data and give you a bad system. It's going to act badly. And one very specific instance of this was the chatbot that Microsoft made to understand the conversations that were happening on Twitter and interact with everybody on Twitter. But it was trained, it was learning from all of the conversations happening around the world, no matter who or where, what was happening on Twitter. And there's a lot of bad things, a lot of hate, a lot of bullying, a lot of cursing, a lot of racism that happens on Twitter. And those things actually get a lot of responses. They get a lot of attention because people like to argue over these things, right? It evokes a lot of emotion in people. So when they made this machine learning construct to go out on Twitter and learn from the conversations happening on it, and it very quickly turned into a very nasty bot. It was saying very rude things, racist things, mean things, only after 24 hours of ingesting all of this stuff and training itself, machine learning style, on the conversations happening on Twitter. Even so bad that Microsoft had to shut down the entire research exercise because it was just way too offensive. So chatbot only lasted a little while in this experiment. So this is an example, and we need to practice putting the right data in when we train systems for machine learning. And we're seeing this all over the spectrum in questioning how we're training algorithms with machine learning all the time. So we're using algorithms to train machines to drive cars, to help sentencing in criminal behavior, to do all sorts of things. And a lot of times that the data that we're using to train these systems have biases in them. For example, most of the people that are developing software are in maybe one country or work with a certain amount of type of people, and they don't represent a lot of different thoughts or cultures around the world. That happens quite often. A lot of times data can be corrupted or put in because they don't have a complete data set, and therefore it's not able to accommodate or think about systems that involve different types of people. These are all very important questions when we think about machine learning. And this chatbot, I encourage you to go look it up, is a good example of that. All right, so I want to ask you a question, Together Learners. So one of the best skills that you can get in learning and navigating this new digital world is being able to understand just a little bit more deeply about how these AI systems are integrating with your life. And so I want you to ponder this very simple question. And we're going to help each other think about how we're going to start criticizing the data that we get from systems that are derived from machine learning. So think about this question. What would you ask a chatbot if you wanted to know more about the data that was used to train it? Going back to the example I just gave you about Tay, all right, you could ask it a question about Twitter or about your thoughts about its upbringing or its training in general. Would you be direct about it? And maybe you can even turn this into a question about what would you ask the creators about the data set that it was collected, and being able to kind of surmise if that data set was actually being biased against you or biased against other people. Let's have this as a starting point, a discussion together at togetherlearning.com. If you're not a member, you can come down and join us. We're studying things like new media, game design, search mastery, and all types of stuff based around being able to be a better digital citizen in the world so we can engage and solve problems together through technology. All right, machine learning. What do you think? You think you learned a little bit more about it watching this episode, this video? I hope you did. And I hope you come back to Together Learning to help us discuss and learn a little bit more together. We'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye now.